Greetings, folks. Welcome to the Game Audio Institute, and we are in a late night, sort of Benjolin-ish coding session. So where we last left off was pretty basic stuff. We basically just had like an oscillator going on, and we were moving our thing on. It wasn't really controlling the oscillator or anything like that. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna actually like kind of hook things up. I do want to I did actually do a little bit of work outside of looking at the things here. But what I want to do is sort of go over there and show you a little bit of what I was dealing with, and kind of also show you what the problem was that I had going on before. And I might have mentioned it in the previous video a little bit there, but basically what we're doing is in this situation, what we had was a thing where I had the camera in there, but it was kind of like the scene camera. At least I wasn't getting like, a camera in which as soon as I start the game and move my mouse, then the camera starts moving and the position starts moving. So I at least had solved that issue. But what happened is that I ended up in a situation where I was kind of in the scene camera all the time. So what that meant was that all of my calculations for how far the object was going to move left to right or up and down were all based on what the scene camera was going to see at that particular time and what it was going to like, what ranges it was going to basically be traveling in, essentially. And what would happen would be that if you move the camera at all, during your editing scene or whatever like that, you move the scene camera around at all in any way, then what would happen would be you would start it again, and then those values would be off because you were now in a slightly different position, and so everything would be off. So the answer was, what I needed was a completely static camera that would just stay in place and never move. So I found this out with the aid of our assistant, Austin Smith, who's been working in Unreal a bit more than I have actually lately. Anyway, so let's take a look and see what was going on with that. Open level blueprint. Okay, so we're opening the level blueprint here, and what this is a couple of relatively simple things, but it's good to go over them just in case you want to have a totally static camera inside your game and not follow anything around. Okay. So the basic things that you need are, essentially you want to get the player controller. We don't need this actually. Not that I know of. And then what you'll want to do is you'll basically say get player controller. Now, one of the things that I keep getting confused by is that by default, Unreal is going to potentially stick you in this thing where you'll have this sort of context sensitive blueprint list, where you're going to go and look for various blueprint nodes. And I find that to not be very helpful, basically. So that's just one thing to remember is, having the context sensitive situation can work in some cases, but in a lot of cases it's really not as good. So it's not a benefit, honestly. So you want to turn that off, and you can basically do that pretty easily. If you start typing something here and you're saying you look for things, you see this context sensitive, and by default it turns on. Oh, sorry, you can't see this. Sorry, you should see my face. Stop. Yeah. So right here, where it says context sensitive, okay? That thing right there, that little check mark right there is kind of an enemy of yours a little bit, because what happens is it will limit the amount of choices that you will see available. And many times what you want is a very generic kind of thing and not a very specific thing. And so it's just using its own logical as to determine whether something is logical or, makes sense or whatever. Or is context, or is in that context, or is not in that context. So what happened was, you will not find get player controller. If you can, watch this. So if you say get player controller, you can see, oh, actually it is showing up here. So in my case, it wasn't showing up, or maybe it was set view target with blend. That was not showing up. Let me see. Probably it'll be all behaving correctly now. Yeah, so there's an example right there. So if I said set view target with blend, which is exactly the name of this node, you saw that nothing basically showed up here. Okay, so remember to take that context sensitive thing off, or a lot of things will not show. Okay, so that's what I did. And what you're going to do is you're going to use the set view target with blend function here at the top. I think that's as far as I get in there. Unfortunately, I can't really zoom in any further. But yeah, so that's basically the deal there. You're going to do that. And then what happens is you will need a get player controller option, and you're going to need a camera actor blueprint. And in this particular case, you can just drag one over from the scene, from your scene into here, and it'll make that variable from the persistent level. And once you've got that happening, that will basically take your camera, make that the static camera, and you're good to go. Okay. So as a result of that, now I was able to go into my, I think it was actually the mouse controller. Yep, that's right. So if we can recall what we were doing before, it's a whole bunch of junk here, really. We take the mouse location, we convert it to world space. And we're going to take, right now, we're only going to take our X and I believe it's Z. Sorry, Y and Z. Y and Z. So Y being, yeah, Y is, I think Y is up and down and Z is left and right, I believe. I might be wrong. No, I might be wrong about that, actually, because Unreal is different than Unity. Anyway, so the deal is that just those two directions. The direction we cannot move right now is to go back to front. We can't push and pull our object toward and away from us. And that is technically the X thing. So that is frozen in place. The other ones are a bunch of multipliers. Basically, just try to get these number ranges to some degree of usefulness. And then we're going to basically put them all into here and deal with all that sort of stuff. Now, what happens is the exciting part that we've literally taken 10 minutes to get to or more, 8 minutes to get to, is to actually take this stuff and make it use it to control the synthesizer, basically. So what I want to do is probably use an X value to control the pitch, or say a horizontal value to control the pitch, and a vertical value to control maybe like an LFO or something like that, like an LFO depth. They'll be like, I'll hook up an LFO to the MetaSounds, and we'll see what happens. So one thing to mention about this before going on too much further, the Benjolin is a somewhat complex circuit. It's not super, super obvious, and there's a number of things. As I mentioned before, if you remember the other ones that I talked to, specifically, it's that shift register, and there's an XOR gate that goes into it. There's a whole bunch of, it's kind of complex. There's a lot of cross-modulation type stuff that I'm not as familiar with how to do at all, period, much less in MetaSounds. So I'm going to have to get some external help for, how to do this, I believe. Anyway, what we're going to do here is we only really need 2 float values. So we do need to have a float value here that's going to come out, and we're going to have to map that float value to a range when we get it out, because the range is going to be really bad, and we're going to need a multiplier, even more bigger multiplier, really. I think we have a multiplier of like, we got a range of about 400 ranges, 500 in the other direction, 400 in the other direction. So we'll see what happens. It'll basically going from minus 100 to 300. We really do need to remap it to like a 0 to 1 range or something like that. We'll figure it out. So now I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to say set float. And there it goes again with that context sensitive thing. See, you just don't get it otherwise. You'll get all kinds of things you don't want. So you go set float parameters. See, you wouldn't have this otherwise. So set float parameter is what you want. And let's just see. And this is actually under the audio, which is exactly what we want. We want it under audio. Set float parameter. Boink. All right. And we do have the execution line, so we'll see about how to hook that up with that value. I guess we would probably want to come out of here. Yeah, something like that. Well, execution string. That's get mesh. No, I think that's correct. I think that's actually what I would want. We'll see what happens. Okay, so that's the idea. Let's set flow parameter, and then we want to go to our MetaSounds, and we want to put in an input. And the input, we want to put an input, and the input is going to be, whatever we want it to be, basically. So in this case, I'm going to call this an input called. Can I rename it? Yes, I can. We're going to call this oscillator frequency. And then I'm going to call this, I don't know, LFO depth or something like that. Be the next one I think I'll go. So this next one will be called LFO underscore depth. Okay. So now we have oscillator frequency, LFO depth. Let's just see what happens. And we have to basically drag them in to make them represent. So we have this. That's oscillator frequency. And here is LFO depth. And, right. So LFO depth goes into modulation, probably. Modulation frequency input for doing FM. Yeah, right. So frequency modulation, which is basically vibrato. So basically we're doing this, and then we have our oscillator frequency, which is right here. So 400 and something to minus whatever. But we do need to map something. So we need to see if we can do a map. Can we do a map? Map range, float. Look at that. Fantastic. So let's go from our input range, I think is going to be at minimum of about 100. Oh, sorry, minus 100. That's right. Minus 100.0. Our second value, well, it's going to be either 400 or 500. I can't remember what it was. I think it was like 400. Yeah, we'll find out whether it's 400 or 500, but both of them will definitely get 400. So let's go 400 there. And then our output range, well, let's see. Let's go for like 10 hertz to, I don't know, maybe a couple of thousand hertz. We'll see what happens. It's going to be very annoying, I bet. All right. So that's going to be that. And then we will then use that to control the frequency of our sine wave. This is very exciting. We're actually going to get actual control over this. So that's super awesome. And we can even do this if we want to just start this up. We can just, play that, and then we can go, oh, look. And nothing happened. Huh. That is not changing. Why not? Because that value coming in is 1. That's why. That's why that would not work. Let's see what happens. We'll find out. Yeah, we'll find out if what happens in this particular case. I do probably want to make an LFO. Low. Let me just see if we have anything here. Low frequency. Oh, come on. You have to call it an LFO. LFO. Get LFO. Just an LFO depth. There we go. LFO, and the output goes into modulation here. Oh, come on. What? Really? Connection pin types do not match. That's a bit weird. Phase offset or glide. Modulation, I guess that's something else. Frequency input for doing FM. But it doesn't actually modulate the frequency, so we'd have to be doing like this. As well as that? Can you do 2? No. Huh. So you probably have to do like a mix, I guess, of some kind or another. I can't imagine you would not do a mixer. like a CV mix of some kind or another, or CV malt or whatever like that. I think you'd have to do like a malt. All right, let me see what I can do with that. It definitely seems like I should be able to do this, unless there's, it says type of sine wave generator. No, not sync, not I would think the modulation would be right, but that's, and then what is this? Output of the LFO and block rate. Interesting. All right, well, we'll figure that out. Let's get the frequency thing, if hopefully working. We have no idea. This is all just guessing. Go to the mouse controller, set parameter and name, input name in float. Okay, what is this doing? And then this single precision, but it doesn't do anything else. Target is self. Controller interface. In name. Well, okay, we'll try that. What was it? Oscillator frequency? If we can figure that out. OSC frequency. Let's just try this out and see if this is something we can do. OSC. Nope. OSC frequency. I don't know if that's going to be doing anything actually to me. Maybe it will. It's a bit weird. Okay, compile that. Oh, it's a problem. What do you not like? Target must have a connection. Right. Target must have a connection. That's important. All right. Let me go and find out why that's not working. Yeah, so basically the deal in this particular case, let me just make sure, yeah, okay, cool. So there are some complexities, of course. This is Unreal. Things are always slightly more complex than I'm prepared to deal with on any given day almost. So here's the deal. When I'm in my mouse controller script, and I choose to say I want to have it do the controller thing, the thing that I was telling you about, the get float. It needs a reference to the audio component that, in this case, is playing the MetaSounds file. So if I wanted to, I could potentially, I suppose, add a component to my mouse controller, which would be an audio source for that component. But I already have one over on the blueprint. So I didn't want to, like move it over if I wanted to. But so that's going to create another problem. And that is that I will show you. So the deal in that particular case is if I go to my level blueprint, yeah. So now what happens is, you can't see this, of course. It's all out of your view. So what happens in this case is, right over here, the set float parameter essentially needs an audio component target. And because I'm on the Benjolin, because I'm on the blueprints, I can drag it over from the level itself and it'll be just fine and it'll work. And this will basically work fine. So the thing is that this set float parameter now has a connection to the object because I just simply dragged it over from my level, basically. I had to have multiple windows open and everything like that, but basically that's the deal. So now what happens is I have the set float parameter there and the audio component is the target and my main source is because now I can basically just drag this in from the level. That now leaves us with the next problem. The problem then in this being is that the float value has to come from another object. So in other words, the float has to come from another actor, from this case, our mouse controller object. So I have to figure out a way of being able to send a float from the mouse controller so that it will then be received here in the input float and then assigned to the oscillator frequency. Just to make things a little bit, hopefully, slightly more logical and entertaining, but we shall see if it may not work. We'll find out. All right, so So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this input. I'm going to try and do a simple thing. We can see if it'll actually work or not. We got the map range right. We were trying to start at, -0 to 400 and then, okay, like that. I don't really want to adjust the range. I like the range that it was. But there's also a situation where you can adjust the range here. And the range here is set from 0 to 1, which is a typical float range, of course. But I'm going to set it from -100. Sorry, -100. And then map that over here to, what was the other one? That was like 400 or something like that, right? Okay, so we'll do that. So we're basically setting it to the same input values that it currently has already, and we'll try it and see if maybe it will actually spit out a value that will be logical and get mapped. I mean, hopefully it should just have at least manual control. Yes, it does. Cool. All right. So yay, we got sound out of it, and we actually have a frequency control that makes sense now. So that was cool, because basically it was going from 0 to 1, which really wouldn't have made much of a difference in the volume, or in the pitch, I should say. Okay. Alrighty, let's pause, and I will try and research about how to send a float value from one blueprint to another.